The Tao of Self-Confidence, episode 864. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. I would love your support if you can pre-order a copy of my upcoming book, The Tao of Self-Confidence, A Guide to Moving Beyond Trauma and Awakening the Leader Within. Pre-order your copy on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, and all other book retailers. You will also receive bonus gifts for pre-ordering. Just send your proof of purchase to info@shinayapchan.com to receive your free gifts. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today I have an amazing lady on the show. Actually, I'm a fan of this lady. I see her stuff on LinkedIn. She always posts, things that, are not normally talked about, especially when it comes to race and culture. And so I'm just really excited to have her on today to share her story and wisdom on confidence. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Aiko Bethea, who is the founder of Rare Coaching and Consulting. Hi, Aiko. How are you today?
I'm fine, Sheena. I am glad to be here with you. So I am recovering from so many things, being an attorney, working in corporate America, working in philanthropy. I'm also a mom of 2 teen boys based in Atlanta, and I run a leadership development firm that you just now named, Rare Coaching Consulting, and we're comprised of over 30 certified executive coaches and facilitators, all people of color, and we focus on leveling up leadership.
I love that, especially, as women of color, when you see the, just the numbers of women and women of color leaders, the representation, it's, if you put all of them together, I don't even think it'll reach 10%. And people of color comprise 40% of the population in the US, and it's going to go over for sure. And so having consulting firms like yours is really needed, right? Because we have amazing leaders out there. It's just showing them how to get there. So I love what you're doing. And Aiko, what's your cultural background?
So my mom's Japanese, and she moved here when she was about 28 in terms of moving to the US. And my dad was African American.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And what'd be your favorite self-confidence quote?
Oh, you know what? I loved that you asked this. And there's a theme in both of them. So one's Nina Simone's, which is you've got to learn to leave the table when love's no longer being served. The second one is Audre Lorde's, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And that's an act of political warfare.
I love both of those quotes, especially with self-care, right? I mean, especially in Asian culture, we're always told to, take care of everybody else. And we forget to take care of the most important person, which is ourself. And self-care is so needed, especially if we want to be able to impact, other people, right? We got to work on ourselves first. We got to take care of ourselves. We got to love ourselves. And that takes a mindset change as well, because we've been programmed to do something, from generation to generation. And then I also love the Nina Simone quote that you mentioned about leaving the table when there's no more love. Sometimes we try to fit in or try to get that seat at the table, when really sometimes we just got to create our own table, right? We just got to create it and show them that we are capable. So I love both those quotes that you mentioned. And in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
So I would say actually both of those quotes embody what self-confidence is, which is actually thinking about yourself, your own self-worth as well, being willing to set boundaries where you're able to say no to some things or walk away from them when they're harmful or they're not serving you and your purpose or your values. So I think when you are living a life like that, your self-confidence comes through.
Thanks for sharing that great definition. And I totally agree, especially when it comes to self-worth, right? As women in general, we just never feel like we're worthy. And because of that, we suffer from a huge confidence gap where women are capable, more capable than we realize, but it's because of how we perceive ourselves that really stops us from taking the first step or taking action or speaking up. So I love that definition that you mentioned. And Aiko, what was your life like before you're discovering self-confidence?
One thing I would say about with self-confidence and a gap with women having self-confidence, I would say that it's really society denying us permission about a lot of things and actually feeding us a narrative over and over about our worth, who we are, who we can be, and who we can't be. So when I think about my own journey around it, I think more about moments where either the environment I was in or people I was around actually tried to feed me that narrative, whether it's by what they said or how they treated me or what was apparent in the environment, like being the only one at times. So I think that those were all issues that were in the water. And for me to actually start naming things, to be okay in terms of naming being Black in relationship to whiteness, naming being an immigrant, a child of immigrants, and also someone who doesn't speak English as a native language, all those things, like being able to name those aspects of myself as belonging and being worthy. I think that's when I was much more empowered to be able to recognize my worth and also to realize the stories that are told to me or the words and language that's used or the spaces that are created in the environments. Those are the things that have issues. And I think when you have awareness, what an awareness does is that it enables change. And so it enables not only for me to be able to respond to what's happening around me and recognize it's not something innate in me of being less worthy, or that, oh, I don't have confidence versus confidence is being denied, or I'm getting messages about if I have a right to be confident. So I think the awareness, when I started being able to name things, it actually reflected that I had greater awareness, which means then I could actually step into a change. And I say change, not so much about myself, but about what society tells us is okay and not.
I love that. And it's so true, right? Of course, as women, there's so many double standards we go through, societal and cultural. Even for a woman to promote herself, like it's deemed shameful or not ladylike. Or if we go after something, we're seen as too much or too ambitious, as, while men do it, they're courageous and confident. So being able to push through those labels, I mean, if we get called by those, that's fine, right? Because we have a bigger purpose to it. And so learning to eliminate those things and creating a new environment, especially when you come from, Asian culture is very rigid. They do the same thing over and over again, passed down to generation to generation to generation. Not that there's any fault in it, but that's all they knew that's all they ever knew. So they think that's the formula to success. And so, like you mentioned, when we build awareness, then we realize, oh, we can do other stuff. We can go out there and create the change. I mean, I don't have to be what, my ancestors told me. And that's a big wake up call for us, right? Especially like what you're doing, creating your own leadership, consulting and coaching firm. What was that aha moment that made you push through that? Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't easy, right? There was a lot of challenges and pushback. But what was that aha moment that made you realize you're going to go out there and create this?
I think it was when I knew that I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. And I realized why, that you really can't ever be fully free when there's always limitations on your ability to make choice, especially in choice that aligns with your values. And when I moved from Seattle back to Atlanta, I had options to apply for new jobs or what have you. And I just decided I don't want to do it. And I also realized there was a deficit in what I was able to get in my own leadership journey that exists for a lot of people. And I didn't want that to be the case anymore in terms of who do you usually see who is established as an executive coach and a successful one? Who do you usually see who gets to set the standards for what a leader is or how a leader should show up? And we know that that is stale and old. It's not current state, and it's certainly not the standards that allows all of us to thrive. And there's tons of approaches to leadership. And we also know that the workplace of today is not thriving under old leadership guard. So I felt like it was important for us to create space for not only folks who look like us, but also for folks who don't look like us, who might be white or white males or what have you, but for them to also have spaces of deeper self-reflection that comes from people who look like us, who are usually, who are people of color, or women of color, because we know that HR and other places, I mean, the majority of folks in leadership, or at least in those sectors, are white women. So there are women, but it's a very different lens when you start adding race and ethnicity. So I felt like, if not me, then who?
I love that. And, it was the main reason why I started everything that I wanted to do, right? Representation was really important for me. And for the longest time, there was no one out there that looked like me, who were leaders, who were breaking barriers, creating history. I mean, when I look at, the recent wins of Everything Everywhere All at Once, I cry every time I listen to their speeches because I understand the struggle that they had to go through to get to where they are today. And I think that's really important when it comes to forging our own paths, because people just see what they see on social media, right? The fancy cars, vacations, but nobody understands the struggle, right? Nobody understands, even just like mentally what we're going through, the anxiety, the fear. And that's all part of the journey, because when we look back, we can appreciate it more, right? We realize, I did this, with the help of the community, we're able to create the change that we want. So I love everything that you mentioned, because there is still a deficit when it comes to representation for women of color, or just people of color, or underrepresented groups in general, right? In all industries. And, it's up to people like you and I to just go out there and create it, even if it's tough at times or challenging, or there's always pushback that's going to happen. So those are all signs that we're heading towards something amazing. But, because you were able to forge your own path, what's your life been like now?
I think one, just being an entrepreneur, there's a different level of one, ownership, which is great ownership and agency. The other part, though, is I think the more successful you get, sometimes the lonelier it can get. The other part is there's more responsibility as you grow a team and making sure that people are being paid equitably, and also making sure that there's revenue coming in the door, and you're the face, and a lot of the accountability lands on you. So a lot of that has been challenging, and trying to make sure that I keep fidelity to what I believe in. When you're an entrepreneur, you're just moving fast and furious, and you can be harmful based on action bias and not fully thinking things out. For me, I'm somebody who often I'm thinking very pragmatically. And so that means that when I'm communicating, sometimes it can land in a way that I don't intend, in terms of it feels very terse. And so I have to just be so much more mindful in those sorts of ways. And I wish I'd done that much earlier in my career, but I do think the workforce, being a litigation attorney, being in leadership, a lot of the space of being able to lead with ease or softness is taken away from you. And it's, in order to be credible, at many times, all the things that people characterize as being a woman, or as an Asian woman, or being as a Black woman, you have to be so mindful of, because it becomes a compounded tax. And it's the proximity to whiteness, whether it's how you show up or assimilate or what have you, is rewarded, because it's easier for other people in the system we're navigating. So those aspects have been the most challenging parts, but it is great for my teen boys, I think, to be able to see their mom living according to her own values. I think it's great for me to be able to say no to things that I don't want to do, or to be able to be very honest with folks, where if I was working internally, it would be more challenging to make a stand, and there would be certain types of repercussions.
Yeah, I love everything that you mentioned, because I think, people don't understand, like sometimes they look at you like you made it, but like there's always going to be challenges that comes, especially running your own business. It's not about being able to pick the hours that you want to work. Yes, you can, but sometimes you might have to work 24 hours in a day.
Yes, like that startup build up time is no joke. It's definitely, nothing's being handed to you for us. And we can go on a whole other conversation talking about VCs and startups and who's really taking a risk and who's not. Like, for many of us, the risk means that your kids may not eat and you might be homeless. For other folks, it's, oh, that loan that my dad gave me for 2 million or 3 million, maybe it's not going to work out. But for many of us, it's a much bigger risk. And for us who might also be first gen, it has repercussions on our families. If we're supporting family members and other aspects where, when we're saying, oh, look at these great entrepreneurs who took a risk. Okay, I'm sorry, Elon Musk, but no, you didn't really take a risk like that. Jeff Bezos, no, that's not really how it went down. And we can name a few white women on that list too. So it is, you're right. People see the sweet side of it, but not the risk that you're taking even to jump into the fire. Sheena, I was thinking about something as we were talking, and I wanted to know, is it okay if I back up for a minute about something?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm just loving this conversation.
I appreciated a nuance that you named earlier about things being passed down generationally. Of course, all people, all Asian folks, all whatever category, we're not a monolith, of course. But I like the fact that you pointed out that it's not always about society and the systems that we're navigating. Sometimes it is the narrative that we got from our families or community of origin. And that is a really hard nut to crack when you think about the risk of your moving forward or doing something differently can include a risk about being on the outside from your family. So when you think about, hey, if your parents work several jobs or even a cohort of family members made sacrifices so that you could go to law school or do whatever, and then you make this decision that you're no longer going to practice law and the impact it can mean to them, or the first time you say no to someone in the family, or when you buck certain standards or ways of being in your family, the price can be so much higher in terms of being ostracized from your family versus risking trying to even show them a new way. So we often think about the way that we show up and the things that we feel we don't have a permission to do as being out there, but it can be from our community and families of origin, and knowing that they too are not untouched by whiteness, assimilation, survival, which often might mean assimilation and being quiet and under the radar. So I appreciated you mentioning that aspect of even within our communities and our families, how doing something differently can be hard for us to make that decision.
Oh yeah, I mean, I talk about this stuff all the time. Like even in my upcoming book, we touch on things like the model minority myth, intergenerational trauma, which is things that are our Asian parents don't tell us to talk about, right? But it's so needed to bring awareness to this so we can find the tools and resources to move forward and show up as the best leader we can be, because we can be leaders. And it's just kind of peeling away the different layers. And some of them don't even realize sometimes their trauma is controlling them, right? And so if they can't bring awareness to that, they're going to be stuck in this rut. So I love everything that you mentioned. It's definitely something we need to bring up and bring awareness to. So thank you so much, Aiko, for that. And, for our listeners who are tuning into your amazing episode and they're in their own journey of self-confidence, what would be those words of wisdom you would give to them?
I think what was represented in both the quotes that we mentioned earlier about Audre Lorde and Nina Simone includes the idea of also boundaries. And boundaries looks like saying no to a lot of things and not feeling guilt about it, or at least that guilt not stopping you from doing what you need to do to have a fulfilled life as well. I think these other ideas about self-interrogation, of scrutinizing, why do I believe this? And why am I making this decision when in my gut it doesn't feel right? So this idea of embodiment and listening to what our bodies are telling us sometimes. And that means you have to slow down. That means that you have to give yourself space to actually even reconnect with your body about, why does this not feel right? And listen to it, into it, and get closer to that, because otherwise you're just going to always be in the storm of societal standards, family of origin beliefs, things that may not be aligned with who you are or who you're aspiring to become.
I love that. I mean, I think it's a great reminder to set boundaries, right? Especially as Asian women, we're not taught to do that, right? We're not taught to say no to things that don't serve us. Doesn't help when you get like the Asian parent guilt trip that just makes you feel so bad that you just end up doing it out of that guilt. And so sometimes we really got to stand up and just say no. And it's the most amazing feeling. It's scary. Don't get me wrong. It's scary, but it's the most amazing feeling ever. So I really love all the tips that you mentioned. And if our listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you or check out some of your coaching and consultancy work, is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
Sure, they can follow us on Instagram, which is at rare_coach, or they can just go to our site, which is rarecoaching.net, N-E-T.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Aiko, you can also head on over to thetowofselfconfidence.com and search for Aiko's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I just really want to thank Aiko today for taking the time out of her busy schedule to share her story and wisdom. So Aiko, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sheena. And you just made me think of something too. I am going to send you a link to a self-assessment around navigating productive conflict. And the reason why I thought about that is how it's hard for many of us to say no. It's hard for many of us to lean into conflict. If you're like my family, in terms of the Japanese side of my family, conflict can be is something to be avoided, and you don't rock the boat. So I'm going to send you a link to that self-assessment.
Sounds good. And we'll have that on the website as well. So thank you again. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. You can order your copy of Asian Women Who Boss Up book by visiting our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.